It is March, and we are back with the March edition of Drinks with Darin. And back by popular demand, we have my good friend Jimmy Le-Tang from, what's your company's name?
JLTCPA.
Jimmy is the tax professional extraordinaire, and we've got a really interesting topic for you this week. So we're not going to talk about real estate news. There's always lots of real estate news, and there's lots to talk about, as always. We talked about the speculation tax last month, but on this episode of Drinks with Darin, we're going to talk about something that I get a ton of questions about. And Jimmy, what are we talking about?
I believe you're talking about building out a secondary suite.
Property values have gone up, obviously, a lot in recent years, and in British Columbia, I get a ton of questions about people who either want to build a secondary suite, maybe they have a secondary suite already, and we're going to talk a little bit about the tax implications of either building or having one, and what you probably should or should not be doing. So Jimmy's going to help us with that, and then of course we're going to get into our statistics as we always do. Now, before, what's the tradition on Drinks with Darin? What do we have in front of us?
What we've got here is India Pale Ale Red Racer.
Which I'm sure both of these taste absolutely phenomenal. So you see, these are a little taller than normal, and the reason we have to do a little taller than normal is, of course, we're talking about taxes. So
that's a good one.
So we need to liven the party a little bit here. So we're gonna open these up. We're gonna take a sip, and we're gonna see what we think.
All right, butter me up a little bit. I can talk for a long time.
Cheers, buddy.
Thank you very much. That's really good.
So I go to Central City almost all the time now for doing Drinks with Darin, and I love their beer. This is the ISA you're enjoying? What do you think?
It's actually really nice. It's light, it's smooth, it tastes good. I'm not much of a beer drinker, so for me to say that this is actually pretty yummy, that's really saying something.
Yeah, Jimmy likes everything, so he's just saying that because for the camera. This is awesome. So I'm doing the IPA. It is good. I've had all these so many times, and these are actually from the personal collection in the real estate fridge in my office. So they are tasty. I knew they were tasty before we got here, and that's why we're enjoying them today.
It is definitely very tasty.
All right. Let's get into it. So Jimmy and I have talked a lot about my own personal residence for my own personal tax purposes. And one of the questions I had for Jimmy, which I thought would be such a great message for you at home, was I built a secondary suite years ago. So if you're from the CRA, just turn down the volume, watch another video, don't pay attention. I built a secondary suite in my basement. Now, it was a little bit different than maybe constructing a whole entire new secondary suite, but there was like a wall put up here. We added some electrical, and it's all done with permit and everything.
Yeah.
But one of my questions for the audience that I thought they might enjoy today, if I'm going to add a secondary suite to my primary residence, there's not one there currently. What do I have to know from a tax perspective?
Absolutely. So when you make structural changes to your property to make it more conducive for an income-producing purpose, that constitutes a partial change in use of your property. Now, we all know that you probably made the changes to your property because you want to use that space downstairs for maybe your in-laws or something like that.
It was
right?
Always for the in-laws.
Absolutely.
The space is
we
always
love
for the
in-laws.
Yeah.
So the in-laws are moving in downstairs, etc. So when you make a partial change in use of your property for an income-producing purpose, such as renting it out, that constitutes a change in use, a partial change in use.
Okay.
And when you have a partial change in use, the CRA deems there to be a partial deemed disposition.
This does not sound promising.
No, it does not sound promising at all. Anytime you hear the words deemed disposition, it means a sale that didn't actually happen.
Oh, I thought you were going to say if your spouse says that I accuse you of a deemed disposition, what do you got to watch out for?
So, yeah, you hear the words deemed disposition, it's a sale that didn't actually happen.
Okay.
But the purpose of that is you've converted a property now from a personal use to now an income-producing use, and the CRA wants to tack you on the taxes for any subsequent increase in value of the property. Okay. So when you have that partial change in use, there's a deemed disposition for the prorated portion of the property that is then converted to an income-producing use. Later on, when you subsequently sell the property, you will have a capital gain in the prorated amount for that particular space. Okay. You'll have a principal residence exemption to waive the rest of the capital gain attributable to your personal use portion, but in respect of that partial change in use, that specific portion will be taxed, the capital gain on it.
Okay. So now I know we talked about, there was talk about changing framing towards the house and that sort of thing. So how does that play into this conversation?
So the CRA has administrative policy where they consider there not to be a partial change in use when you meet all of the three following criteria. Okay. Number one, the income producing use is ancillary to the primary property's use as a principal residence. Okay. Number two, you don't make any structural changes to the property to make it more conducive for renting. So structural changes can mean something like putting in a separate entrance. That's a very common thing, right? Okay. It wasn't there before, separate entrance is there now. You did that so that you can make it more conducive for renting.
Which I didn't do on my own suite.
Absolutely not. Maybe you put up a wall or taken down a wall, something like that. Anytime you think about structural changes, you've got a partial change in use. Third criteria is that if the use on an income producing purpose is ancillary, you don't make any structural changes, and subsequently when you report the rental income, etc., you're not claiming any capital cost allowance on the wear and tear of the building itself, then you've met those three criteria. The CRA will allow you to not trigger a partial change in use.
Okay, all right. Well, I need a drink after hearing that. So
it was a lot to say, I know.
This is awful. You need to hydrate here.
I think in short, what you're really looking to do is if you don't make any changes to the property, you're fine, right? If your rental portion of the property is relatively small, you're fine. Now, relatively small might be 500 square foot basement on a 3,000 square foot home. That's relatively small.
Yeah.
But if you've got 2 rental suites downstairs, legal or not legal, right? But the entire rental suite downstairs might be 50% of the entire square footage of your home. Now you're getting into an area where is 50% use of your home as a rental income producing thing ancillary to the use of your property as a principal residence?
That's certainly a good question. And for those of you, that's a very common thing for basement entry style homes. So those type of homes where you come in and you go upstairs right away, you've got the 3 bedrooms, the kitchen, the living room upstairs, but then downstairs a lot of people turn those into entire suites. So now mind you, they're probably not adding a separate entrance at that point, however, so I guess that's why we have Jimmy here. So you can call Jimmy, he can tell you all about that.
Absolutely. If you're going to call me, all you got to say is I'm Darin's client, and I'd be happy to answer your question for you.
And for those of you that aren't my client, you need to be one. So get on that. Let's find you a house. So Jimmy, we've got an audience here. They're interested. I mean, we're head on in tax season. Jimmy even being here right now is pretty lucky because he's a busy guy and he's got lots of RSPs and all the wonderful stuff that goes along with tax season. Is there anything you want people to know? I know there's a good benefit for first-time buyers out there that's back again. You want to share that with everybody?
First-time home buyers is there. You can use your RSP contributions as well under the home buyers plan, so don't forget about that. There's other things that you can do, like the lifelong learning plan if you're going to school, eligible medical expenses. Don't forget about those on your personal tax returns. Also, if you pay an employee portion towards like an employer medical plan, that your portion of the premiums are also considered eligible medical expenses as well. So don't forget about those. And you often see those as deductions directly off your pay stubs.
Okay.
So those are kind of easy to miss.
That's exactly the reason why you hire people like me. You hire people like Jimmy because he's an expert in his field and he knows this stuff inside out. I always joke, and I always say this, that Jimmy is so smart, he makes me feel not so smart. So when it comes to real estate, I know that stuff inside out. But when we get to anything that starts having plus or minus or divide signs beside
debits and credits.
Debits and credits, spouse dividends or whatever we were talking about before, you want to talk to a guy like Jimmy, and Jimmy is incredible. So without further ado, why don't we have one more sip of these?
All right.
Will you join me for going through some of the numbers? What's going on?
Yeah, sure. I'll stick around and join you for the numbers. I want to hear it too. All right. I'm in the game as well, right?
Yeah, Jimmy's house is part of these numbers, so we got to make sure he's informed as well. Then he doesn't have to watch the video later. Well, as you can see, I am here all by my lonesome, and the reason for that is it is snowing like crazy outside. So my good friend Jimmy has a rear-wheel drive car that's probably not the best equipped for that type of weather. So we actually made a decision Jimmy's going to take off, and he certainly shouldn't be finishing this. So we're going to put that off to the side, and we're going to continue on with Darin. So here we go. Let's get into some of the statistics about what's happening in your marketplace, because I think out of all the months in the last few months that we've been talking about this stuff, you're actually going to smile a little bit this month. So let's get into it. Apartments are always interesting. And in the last 3 months, we have seen a decrease of about 3% in the apartment market in the Fraser Valley, which interestingly enough is the same that we have experienced year over year. Now, townhomes aren't really much different. In the last 3 months, you've seen a decrease as well in the Fraser Valley of about 3.16%. With that being said, in the last year, townhomes are down about 2.83. So we've seen a very similar trend for those strata markets. And what the interesting thing is, we talked about months ago on Drinks with Darin, is Detached kind of did its thing, and it seems like it's almost slowed off, but we did expect, as I mentioned to everyone, that we thought townhomes and condos would probably continue to get pulled a little longer, because that's how it tends to work. Now, what happened with detached homes? Detached homes in the last 3 months have gone down about 1.76% and following the trend in and around 3% with the condos and the townhomes we just looked at. Detached homes are down about 3.72 year over year. So let me sum this up a little bit. Nobody likes when they feel like an investment has gone down. We saw the stock market not perform very well in the month of December, or for all of 2018 for that matter. But is it uncommon for a rush or a rise of prices like we experienced over the last 4 years years to see a little bit of a recess there. And we're talking about very small recesses. So for a lot of you, you're not talking about necessarily putting your home up for sale today. You're probably going to be there for a long time. And if you are talking about putting your home up for sale, it's a little bit of a different story, because we can see by these numbers with condos, townhomes, and detached homes, all those markets are performing relatively similar. So if you're selling your townhouse in hopes of buying a detached home, well, your townhouse might be down about 3% year over year, but so is that detached home that you're looking to go buy. So you're actually buying and selling in the same marketplace. You're almost thinking of it like riding a wave with everybody. You're all on the same wave. You're feeling the tide come up and come down together now. So it's pretty interesting if you think about it like that, and it's really almost not that big of a deal. For those of you that are going to be in your home for a long time, we've put you into the great house and you love being there, it's okay, because you know what? You can probably ride this out, which means that if you're not in a monster rush to sell and you're happy with where you're at, then you'll probably see the values come up, because we know historically, year over year, they typically go up over time. So I'm feeling pretty good about everything, and if you do have any questions about that specific stuff, give me a call. I'm happy to help. I want to thank you for watching this episode of Drinks with Darin. I appreciate you being here, and I would ask you for one more thing, is give us a like, leave a comment at the bottom, let us know you're watching, let us know what you think. I'm always so interested and curious about what everyone thinks about these videos, and I get tons of great feedback, but let me know what you think. I'd love to hear. Thanks again for watching us, and we will see you next month.